The morning mist clings to the fjord like ancient spirits reluctant to leave their earthly realm. From the wooden longhouse perched on the rocky shore, Ragnar Ironside emerges, his weathered hands gripping the carved dragon head of his ship's prow. The salty tang of the North Sea fills his nostrils as he surveys the horizon where adventure and fortune await. This is not just any morning in 9th century Scandinavia. This is the day that will determine whether his crew returns home as heroes laden with silver and slaves, or whether the ravens will feast on their bones in foreign lands. The Viking age pulses through his veins like the rhythm of oars cutting through dark waters. Behind him, 37 warriors gather their weapons, gleaming axes that have tasted blood, round shields painted with the symbols of Thor's hammer, and swords passed down through generations of sea kings. Each man carries stories etched in scars, tales of previous raids where they've sailed beyond the edge of the known world. The ship itself is a masterpiece of Morse craftsmanship, 24 meters of oak and pine, flexible enough to ride the fiercest storms yet strong enough to carry warriors across treacherous seas. Her name is Wavestrider, and she's earned her reputation through countless voyages to England, Ireland, and the mysterious lands beyond. As Ragnar runs his fingers along the intricate carvings that spiral up the mast, he remembers his father's words. The sea calls to those brave enough to answer, but she demands payment in courage and blood. Today, like every day for the past 3 centuries, Viking longships will slice through the waves carrying dreams of wealth and glory to distant shores. The crew begins loading their provisions, barrels of ale, dried fish, and the precious amber that traders prize above gold. But their most valuable cargo isn't material wealth. It's the unbreakable bond between warriors who've sworn to fight and die together, bound by oaths spoken over sacred fire and sealed with blood. 3 days out from the Norwegian coast, the sky darkens like a bruise spreading across the heavens. The wind howls with the voice of Fenrir, the great wolf of Norse mythology, while waves tall as mountains crash over the longship's sides. This is when ordinary men pray to their gods and extraordinary men become legends. Ragnar stands at the prow, his red beard whipping in the gale, eyes fixed on the horizon where lightning splits the sky. His crew fights to keep Wavestrider from capsizing, their muscles straining against oars that feel like they're pushing against the very foundations of the earth. The ship groans and flexes, her timbers singing the ancient song of wood and water locked in eternal combat. Hold steady, you sons of wolves. Ragnar bellows over the storm's fury. Thor's hammer strikes the clouds tonight, but we are the children of the sea. His voice carries the authority of a man who's survived 15 years of raiding, who's seen the white cliffs of Dover and the green hills of Ireland, who's stood in the halls of kings and made them tremble. Young Bjorn, barely 18, and on his first voyage, grips his oar until his knuckles turn white. The stories the skalds tell around winter fires never mentioned the terror of feeling so small against the ocean's rage. But as he watches his shipmates work with practiced efficiency, he begins to understand what it means to be Viking. It's not just about the raids and the treasure. It's about facing the impossible and spitting in its eye. The storm rages for 7 hours, testing every joint and rope on the ship. When the wind finally calms and the stars emerge like scattered diamonds, the crew finds themselves in unfamiliar waters. The coastline ahead is shrouded in mist, but the scent of wood smoke and cultivated fields carries on the breeze. They've reached the shores of England, where monasteries filled with gold and silver await their arrival. But first, they must make landfall without alerting the local defenders. Ragnar orders the sail lowered, and the oars muffled with strips of leather. Like ghosts emerging from the sea, the Vikings glide toward shore, their dragon-headed ship cutting through the dark water with deadly silence. The Abbey of Lindisfarne sits on its island sanctuary like a jewel in the North Sea, its stone walls rising from the tidal flats where seabirds nest and ancient saints once walked. Brother Aldrich kneels before the altar, his morning prayers interrupted by an unusual sound. The scrape of wood against stone, the splash of oars, the whispered commands of men who speak in foreign tongues. He rushes to the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. In the pre-dawn darkness, he sees them, tall figures moving like shadows across the beach, their weapons gleaming in the starlight. Vikings? The very word strikes terror into the hearts of Christian monks who've heard the stories from other coastal settlements. The attack comes swift and brutal. Ragnar's warriors scale the monastery walls with the agility of cats, their battle cries echoing across the sacred grounds. Odin, Odin, Odin. They shout, invoking their one-eyed god of war and wisdom. The sound sends the monks scrambling for hiding places that don't exist. Inside the abbey, Brother Aldrich attempts to hide the most precious artifacts, illuminated manuscripts that took decades to create, golden chalices blessed by archbishops, silver crosses embedded with precious stones. But the Vikings move with the efficiency of men who've done this countless times before. They know exactly where to look, which stones to overturn, which floorboards to pry up. Ragnar himself strides through the abbey's halls, his presence filling the sacred space with an aura of barely contained violence. Yet when he encounters Brother Aldrich cowering behind the altar, something unexpected happens. The old monk looks up at the Viking chieftain and speaks in halting Norse. "You seek treasure. I can show you greater wealth than gold." The monk leads Ragnar to the scriptorium, where hundreds of books line the walls. These contain the wisdom of ages, Brother Aldrich explains. Stories of distant lands, maps of unknown territories, knowledge that could make you the most powerful sea king in the north. It's a desperate gambit, but the monk has heard that some Vikings value knowledge as much as silver. Ragnar examines the manuscripts, his fingers tracing the intricate Celtic knots that border the pages. He cannot read the Latin text, but he recognizes the value of information. Maps showing the location of other monasteries, trade routes that merchant ships follow, the defensive capabilities of the English kingdoms. This knowledge could be worth more than a shipload of treasure. The raid on Lindisfarne yields more than gold and silver. It establishes a pattern that will define Viking warfare for generations. Swift attacks, overwhelming force, and the tactical intelligence to strike where enemies least expect. But beneath the violence lies a complex code of honor that governs every aspect of Viking society. As Wavestrider cuts through the waves toward home, Ragnar gathers his crew around the mast to divide the spoils. This isn't a simple matter of the strongest taking the most. Viking society operates on principles of fairness and shared risk that would be familiar to modern democratic institutions. Every warrior receives a portion based on his contribution to the raid's success. Young Bjorn, who showed courage during the storm and the monastery assault, receives his first share of treasure: 3 silver coins, a bronze arm ring, and a beautifully crafted eating knife. More importantly, he's earned the respect of veteran warriors who've seen countless young men fail their first test. The ceremony marking his transition from boy to warrior takes place under the stars, with ancient words spoken over oil and fire. The code extends beyond simple wealth distribution. When Eric the Red Sun is wounded during the raid, the entire crew contributes to his care. They share their water rations, tend his wounds, and promise to support his family if he doesn't survive the voyage home. This isn't charity. It's the foundation of a society that depends on absolute trust between warriors who risk everything together. But the code also demands harsh justice. When one crew member is caught stealing from the common treasury, the punishment is swift and brutal. The man is put ashore on a desolate island with only a knife and a day's food. He can attempt to survive alone, or he can die with honor. There's no middle ground in Viking society for those who betray their oaths. Ragnar reflects on these principles as he watches the Norwegian coastline emerge from the morning mist. The raid has been successful, but success in Viking society isn't measured only in treasure. It's measured in the bonds forged between warriors, the reputation earned through courage, and the stories that will be told around winter fires for generations to come. The great hall of Jarl Olaf echoes with the sounds of celebration as Ragnar's crew returns from their successful raid. Tapestries depicting the deeds of legendary heroes hang from the walls, while the central fire pit casts dancing shadows that seem to bring the woven figures to life. This is where warriors become legends, where the events of the raid will be transformed into the epic poetry that defines Viking culture. Gunnar the Skald steps forward, his voice trained through years of memorizing the great sagas. He's more than an entertainer, he's the keeper of Viking history, the man who transforms raw experience into the stories that will inspire future generations. His tale of the Lindisfarne raid begins with traditional formulas that his audience recognizes, but the details he weaves into the narrative are uniquely contemporary. Listen well, you ring bearers and sword dancers. Gunnar begins, his voice carrying the authority of tradition. I sing of Ragnar Ironside, whose ship cuts waves like a sword through silk, whose crew fears neither storm nor Saxon. The audience leans forward, ale cups forgotten, as the skald's words paint pictures more vivid than any artist's brush. The story grows in the telling. The storm becomes a personal battle between Ragnar and the sea god Aegir. The monastery walls become towering fortresses defended by English champions. The treasure becomes a hoard worthy of dragons. This isn't deception. It's the transformation of reality into myth, the process by which ordinary men become the heroes of legend. But the skald's tale serves practical purposes too. Hidden within the poetic language are detailed descriptions of English defenses, sailing conditions, and the wealth available in different regions. Future raiders will use this information to plan their own expeditions, turning entertainment into intelligence briefings. As the night progresses and the ale flows freely, the skald's tale becomes interactive. Warriors who participated in the raid add their own details, correcting or embellishing the narrative. The story becomes a collective creation, owned by the entire community rather than any individual. This is how Viking culture preserves and transmits its values, through shared stories that bind the tribe together. Young Bjorn listens with wonder, realizing that his own deeds have become part of the great saga. The frightened boy who gripped his oar during the storm has been transformed into a heroic figure worthy of song. The transformation is both humbling and empowering. He now carries the responsibility of living up to the legend that the skald has created. Comment below with your favorite Viking legend or tell us which part of this epic voyage captivated you most. The year is 1424, and France bleeds from 100 wounds. The 100 Years' War has ravaged the countryside for nearly a century, turning fertile farmland into graveyards and proud cities into smoldering ruins. In the small village of Domremy, where the Meuse River winds through rolling hills, a 13-year-old peasant girl named Jean d'Arc kneels in the village church, her calloused hands pressed together in prayer. The voices come to her first as whispers, barely audible above the creaking of old wood and the distant lowing of cattle. Saint Michael the Archangel, his armor gleaming with celestial light, appears in the shadowed corner near the altar. Saint Margaret, crowned with the halo of martyrdom, steps from the painted walls. Saint Catherine, her wheel of torment transformed into a symbol of divine victory, speaks with the authority of heaven itself. Daughter of God, they tell her, you must go to the Dauphin. You must drive the English from French soil. You must see the rightful king crowned at Reims. The words echo in her mind like thunder, impossible to ignore or dismiss. This is not madness. This is divine calling, as real as the rough wool of her peasant dress and the dirt beneath her fingernails. Jean's father, Jacques d'Arc, notices his daughter's changed behavior. She spends hours in prayer, her lips moving silently as she communes with voices only she can hear. Her mother, Isabel, watches with growing concern as the girl who once delighted in village festivals now speaks of nothing but the war and France's desperate need for salvation. The family's modest stone house sits on the border between territories loyal to the Dauphin and those controlled by the English and their Burgundian allies. Almost weekly, refugees pass through Domremy, their possessions loaded onto crude carts, their faces bearing the hollow expressions of people who've lost everything to war. Jean sees them and feels the weight of their suffering like a physical burden. The voices grow stronger, more insistent. They show her visions of French knights fleeing from English longbowmen, of the Dauphin Charles hiding in Chinon Castle while his kingdom crumbles around him, of the sacred city of Reims under foreign occupation. The images burn themselves into her memory, fueling a determination that will soon transform an illiterate peasant girl into one of history's most remarkable military leaders. By winter's end, Jean has made her decision. She will leave Domremy, convince the court to accept her divine mission, and lead France to victory against impossible odds. The voices have spoken, and she will obey regardless of the cost. Robert de Baudricourt, the military governor of Vaucouleurs, stares at the young woman standing before him in his fortress chamber. Her peasant clothes are travel-stained, her dark hair roughly cut, but her eyes burn with an intensity that makes seasoned warriors uncomfortable. She claims to have been sent by God to save France, a declaration that would normally result in immediate dismissal or accusations of heresy. You wish me to believe, Baudricourt says slowly, that the creator of the universe has chosen a farm girl to accomplish what the greatest knights of France have failed to achieve. His voice carries the skepticism of a man who's seen too many false prophets and desperate dreamers during the long years of war. Jean stands straighter, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she's requesting. My lord, I have not come to you by my own will, but by the command of my Lord God. He has told me that I must go to the Dauphin, that I must raise the siege of Orleans, and that I must see the rightful king crowned at Reims. Her voice carries an authority that seems impossible for someone so young and lowly born. The governor's advisors exchange glances. They've heard rumors of this girl for weeks, stories of miraculous knowledge, of prayers answered, of local knights and soldiers who've begun to believe in her mission. Sir Jean de Metz, a veteran of countless campaigns, steps forward. My lord, I have spoken with her extensively. She knows details of military situations that no peasant could possibly know. She predicted the defeat at Rouvray before any messenger arrived with news. Baudricourt faces an impossible decision. If he refuses to help her and France falls, he'll be remembered as the man who ignored divine intervention. If he supports her and she fails, he'll be branded a fool who sent a child to her death. The political calculations swirl in his mind like autumn leaves in a whirlwind. But there's something else, a quality in Jean's presence that transcends rational analysis. When she speaks of her mission, the room seems to fill with an energy that makes the hair on men's arms stand up. Soldiers who've grown cynical through years of defeat find themselves straightening their shoulders and remembering why they first took up arms for France. After 3 days of deliberation, Baudricourt makes his choice. He provides Jean with a small escort, male clothing for the dangerous journey, and a letter of introduction to the Dauphin's court. As she prepares to leave Vaucouleurs, he offers her one final piece of advice. The court at Chinon is full of vipers who will test your faith in ways you cannot imagine. Hold fast to your voices, child. They may be the only truth you find there. The journey to Chinon takes 11 days through territory controlled by English and Burgundian forces. Jean and her escort travel primarily at night, following paths known only to smugglers and spies. Yet she shows no fear, only an unshakable confidence that divine protection surrounds her mission. The castle of Chinon looms against the gray sky like a monument to faded glory. Once the seat of Henry II Plantagenet, now it shelters a would-be king who controls barely a third of the realm he claims to rule. The Dauphin Charles, weak-chinned and uncertain, holds court in chambers that have seen better days, surrounded by advisors who plot against each other with the same energy they should direct against he English. Jean arrives at court dressed in men's clothing, her hair cropped short, her manner direct in a way that shocks nobles accustomed to elaborate ceremony. The courtiers whisper among themselves, some calling her a saint, others a madwoman, still others suspecting she's an English agent sent to deceive them. In a time when France teeters on the edge of complete defeat, desperation makes people willing to believe in miracles. The Dauphin, curious but cautious, devises a test. He will hide among his courtiers, while one of them sits on the throne dressed in royal robes. If Jean truly receives divine guidance, she should be able to identify the real prince. It's a clever trap, one that has exposed numerous false prophets in the past. When Jean enters the Great Hall, she barely glances at the figure on the throne. Instead, she walks directly to Charles, who stands among a group of nobles near the great fireplace. She kneels before him, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent chamber. "Most noble Lord Dauphin, I am Jean the maid, sent by the King of Heaven to tell you that you will be anointed and crowned in the city of Reims, and you will be the lieutenant of the King of Heaven, who is the King of France." The courtier ups in whispers and gasps. How could a peasant girl, seeing the Dauphin for the first time, identify him so easily? But Jean's demonstration isn't finished. She requests a private audience with Charles, during which she reveals knowledge that only divine revelation could have provided. Details of his private doubts about his legitimacy, his secret prayers, his deepest fears about the future of France. The Dauphin, shaken by her revelations, orders theological examination of the young woman. For 3 weeks, learned doctors at the University of Poitiers question her about scripture theology and the nature of her divine calling. They expect to find evidence of heresy or deception, but instead encounter a simple faith that confounds their sophisticated arguments. "I know neither nor be," Jean tells them when they question her lack of formal education. "But I come from the King of Heaven." Her humility combined with her unshakable certainty creates a paradox that the scholars cannot resolve. How can someone so obviously uneducated demonstrate such profound understanding of divine will? The examination concludes with a cautious endorsement. The doctors find no evidence of heresy, no signs of demonic possession, no indication that she's anything other than what she claims to be, a peasant girl called by God to save France. The Dauphin, finally convinced, agrees to provide her with troops and equipment for the relief of Orleans. The city of Orleans stands like a defiant fist raised against the English tide that has swept across northern France. For 6 months, the fortress city has endured siege, its walls scarred by cannon fire, its people reduced to eating rats and boiled leather. The English have constructed a ring of fortifications around the city, their strategy simple and effective: starve the defenders into submission. But Orleans is more than just another French city. It's the key to the entire Loire Valley, the last major obstacle between the English and complete control of France. If it falls, the Dauphin's cause dies with it. If it holds, France might yet find the strength to drive the invaders back across the Channel. Jean arrives at the French camp outside Orleans like a lightning bolt striking dry wood. She's been given a suit of white armor, specially crafted for her small frame, and a banner depicting Christ holding the world while flanked by angels. Her appearance electrifies the demoralized French forces, who've grown accustomed to defeat and retreat. The English commanders, Sir John Talbot and Sir William Gloucester, initially dismiss reports of the French peasant girl who claims divine backing. They've faced French sorties before, led by experienced knights and skilled mercenaries, and turned them all back with their longbows and disciplined infantry. What threat could one young woman pose to their carefully planned siege? They underestimate the power of faith to transform ordinary soldiers into heroes. French troops who've spent months cowering behind their fortifications suddenly find the courage to charge English positions. The sight of Jean's white banner advancing through the smoke of battle gives them strength they didn't know they possessed. The assault begins at dawn on May 4, 1429. Jean leads the attack on the English fortress of Les Tourelles, the strongest position in their siege works. Her presence on the battlefield is magnetic. Soldiers fight harder, endure more pain, take greater risks when she's near. It's not magic, but the power of absolute conviction to inspire others. During the assault, an English crossbow bolt strikes Jean between the neck and shoulder, penetrating her armor and drawing blood. For a moment, the French attack wavers, as word spreads that their miracle worker has been wounded. But Jean, after a brief prayer, pulls out the bolt herself and returns to the battle, her banner still streaming in the wind. The sight of her continued resistance after being wounded galvanizes the French forces. They surge forward with renewed fury, scaling the walls of Les Tourelles while English arrows rain down upon them. The fortress falls. Sir William Gloucester drowns in the Loire trying to escape, and the English siege begins to crumble. By May 8th, the English have abandoned their siege works and retreated toward their northern strongholds. The siege of Orleans is broken, the city is saved, and Jeanne d'Arc has achieved her first miracle. But this is only the beginning of her divine mission. Victory at Orleans transforms Jeanne from a curiosity into a phenomenon. Word of the peasant girl who broke the English siege spreads across France like wildfire, igniting hope in hearts that had grown cold with despair. Towns that have submitted to English rule begin to reconsider their allegiances. French nobles who've made peace with defeat start to remember what it means to fight for their homeland. But military success is only half of Jeanne's mission. The voices that first spoke to her in Domremise church demand something more. The Dauphin must be crowned at Reims Cathedral, where French kings have received their divine anointing for centuries. Only then will Charles's legitimacy be beyond question. Only then will the sacred bond between ruler and people be restored. The journey to Reims requires capturing a string of English-held towns along the Loire Valley. Jeanne's strategy is as psychologically sophisticated as it is militarily effective. Rather than simply besieging enemy positions, she offers each town the choice: surrender peacefully and be welcomed back into the French fold, or resist and face the consequences of defying God's will. The town of Jargeau becomes an example of what happens to those who choose resistance. The English garrison, commanded by the Duke of Suffolk, prepares for a conventional siege. They've survived French attacks before, relying on their superior archery and disciplined formations. But they haven't faced an army inspired by divine mission. Jeanne's assault on Jargeau combines tactical brilliance with religious fervor. She positions her cannons to maximum effect, coordinates infantry attacks with artillery bombardment, and personally leads the assault on the walls. When the Duke of Suffolk is captured, she treats him with the courtesy due to his rank while making clear that his cause is hopeless. The pattern repeats at Meung-sur-Loire, Beaugency, and Patay. At Patay, the French achieve a devastating victory against English forces commanded by Sir John Talbot, the same man who failed to hold Orleans. The battle demonstrates that English military superiority is not absolute. When French forces fight with conviction and unity, they can defeat the legendary English war machine. Each victory brings more towns over to the Dauphin's cause. The momentum of success becomes its own weapon, as English garrisons find themselves isolated in increasingly hostile territory. Local populations that have accepted English rule for decades begin to provide intelligence to French forces, guide them around enemy positions, and cut supply lines. But the greatest victory is psychological. For the first time in decades, French forces expect to win battles rather than simply hoping to survive them. The transformation is visible in the way soldiers carry themselves, in their willingness to accept casualties for strategic objectives, in their absolute faith that God fights on their side. As the army approaches Reims, Jeanne's thoughts turn to the culmination of her mission. The voices that first spoke to her in Domremise church have been silent for weeks, but their command remains clear: see the Dauphin crowned, and France will be saved. The Cathedral of Reims rises from the Champagne plain like a prayer-made stone, its Gothic spires reaching toward heaven while its flying buttresses seem to embrace the earth below. For over 500 years, This has been the sacred site where French kings receive their divine anointing, where earthly authority merges with heavenly mandate, where the mystical bond between ruler and people is forged in holy oil and ancient ritual. The Dauphin Charles stands before the high altar, his thin frame dwarfed by the cathedral's soaring architecture. In a few moments, he will cease to be the uncertain prince who hid in Chinon Castle and become Charles VII, King of France by grace of God and the sword of Jeanne d'Arc. The transformation is more than symbolic. It's the resurrection of a kingdom that seemed destined for the grave. Jeanne kneels in the front row of nobles, her white banner held upright beside her. She's exchanged her battle armor for a simple dress, but her presence still dominates the ceremony. This is her moment of triumph, the fulfillment of the divine mission that began in a village church. The voices that commanded her to crown the rightful king are about to be obeyed. The ceremony follows traditions established by Clovis, the first Christian king of the Franks. The holy ampulla, containing sacred oil blessed by Pope Sylvester, is brought forward on a golden salver. The Archbishop of Reims, Regnault de Chartres, performs the ancient ritual with trembling hands. He's crowning a king whose authority depends on the victories of a peasant girl who claims to speak with each angels. Charles, by the grace of God, King of France, the Archbishop intones, as the crown settles on the Dauphin's head. The words echo through the cathedral, witnessed by nobles who've gambled their lives and fortunes on the belief that divine intervention can triumph over military superiority and political calculation. The English, of course, reject the legitimacy of the coronation. They still control Paris, Normandy, and much of northern France. Their boy king, Henry VI, rules from Westminster with the backing of Parliament and the wealth of English merchants. But symbols matter in medieval warfare, and the coronation at Reims strikes at the heart of English claims to French sovereignty. Jeanne watches the ceremony with tears streaming down her face. She's 17 years old, an illiterate peasant who's achieved something that the greatest nobles of France thought impossible. The voices that first spoke to her in Domremy have been vindicated, their commands fulfilled through courage, faith, and the mysterious power of absolute conviction. But even in her moment of triumph, Jeanne senses that her mission may be changing. The voices that once spoke clearly now whisper of new challenges, of trials that will test her faith in ways she cannot yet imagine. The road from Domremy to Reims is complete, but the path ahead leads into darkness. After the ceremony, as the nobles celebrate with wine and song, Jeanne slips away to pray in a quiet chapel. She kneels before a statue of the Virgin Mary, her hands pressed together, her heart full of gratitude and growing apprehension. The voices are silent now, but their absence speaks as loudly as their words once did. France has its anointed king, but the English still hold half the realm. The war is far from over, and the peasant girl who broke the siege of Orleans must now face challenges that military victory cannot overcome. Like and subscribe if you're amazed by how this humble peasant girl changed the course of history. In the marble halls of the Academy in Athens, where olive trees cast their shadows across sundials and scrolls, the greatest mind of the ancient world prepares to share a story that will echo through millennia. Plato, his beard white with age and wisdom, gathers his students around him as the afternoon light filters through the colonnade. Today, he will speak of Atlantis, the lost civilization that once ruled the Western Sea. Listen well, my friends, Plato begins, his voice carrying the authority of a man who has spent his life pursuing truth through reason and contemplation. What I am about to tell you came to me from Solon, wisest of the 7 sages, who learned it from the priests of Sais in Egypt. This is not myth or allegory, but a true account of a great civilization that once flourished beyond the Pillars of Hercules. His students lean forward, their wax tablets forgotten as they prepare to hear a tale that challenges everything they know about the world. Athens may be the crown jewel of Greek civilization, but Plato speaks of a power that made their city-state look like a village. an island empire that commanded the Western Ocean when the Mediterranean was young. 9,000 years before our time, Plato continues, there existed an island larger than Libya and Asia combined. Upon this island arose a civilization of such magnificence that it controlled not only the Atlantic Ocean but much of the Mediterranean as well. Its people were the children of Poseidon, god of the sea, and their capital city was a marvel that surpassed even the greatest works of man. The description that follows challenges the imagination. Concentric rings of water and land, connected by bridges and tunnels, surrounded by walls of precious metals. A harbor filled with ships from every corner of the known world. Palaces built from black and red stone, decorated with gold and silver, housing kings who traced their lineage back to the gods themselves. But this is not merely a story of architectural wonder. Plato describes a society that had achieved what every Greek philosopher dreams of, a perfect balance between power and wisdom, between military might and cultural achievement. The Atlanteans were not merely conquerors but explorers, scientists, and artists who had unlocked secrets that modern civilization could barely imagine. Their knowledge of metallurgy surpassed our own, Plato explains. They had discovered orichalcum, a metal more precious than gold, which they mined from the earth and fashioned into decorations for their temples. Their engineers had mastered the art of irrigation on a scale that would make the Nile Delta look like a garden plot. Their navy commanded vessels that could traverse the ocean as easily as we cross the Aegean. Yet for all their achievements, the Atlanteans fell victim to the very human flaws that plague all civilizations. Their power bred arrogance, their wealth fostered corruption, and their military might led them to believe they could challenge the gods themselves. The story that Plato tells is not just about a lost civilization. It's a warning about the dangers of hubris and the inevitability of divine justice. The priests of Sais, keepers of Egypt's most ancient wisdom, had preserved the memory of Atlantis in their temple records when the rest of the world had forgotten. They told Solon how the Atlanteans, drunk on their own power, had launched a massive invasion of the Mediterranean world, their bronze-armed warriors landing on the shores of Greece and Egypt with the confidence of men who believed themselves invincible. The invasion began with a series of devastating naval battles. Atlantean ships, larger and more advanced than anything the Mediterranean peoples had ever seen, appeared on the horizon like storm clouds pregnant with destruction. Their bronze-reinforced prows cut through the waves while their sails, dyed with the purple of royal authority, blocked out the sun. The defenders of Athens, led by an ancient version of their city that existed only in the memory of the priests, stood alone against invasion. While other Greek cities surrendered or fled, the Athenians chose to fight, their hoplites forming the bronze wall of spears that would become legendary in later ages. The battle was not just between armies but between two completely different ways of life, the maritime empire of Atlantis and the citizen soldiers of Greece. For months, the war raged across the Mediterranean. Atlantean forces, superior in numbers and equipment, pushed inland from their coastal beachheads. Their weapons, forged from the mysterious orichalcum, cut through bronze armor like parchment. Their knowledge of engineering allowed them to build siege works that could breach the strongest walls. Victory seemed inevitable, but the gods, who had once blessed Atlantis with prosperity and power, had grown disgusted with their descendants' arrogance. Zeus, king of the gods, looked down from Mount Olympus and saw a civilization that had forgotten the humility proper to mortals. Poseidon, who had once loved the Atlanteans as his own children, turned his face away from their prayers. The divine punishment began with earthquakes that shook the very foundations of the Atlantic island. The concentric rings of water that had once been Atlantis's greatest engineering achievement became death traps as the earth beneath them cracked and shifted. Massive walls of stone and metal, built to last for eternity, crumbled like sand castles before the tide. The priests of Sais described the final day in terms that still made their voices tremble with awe. The sea itself rose up in anger, driven by winds that howled like the voices of the damned. Waves taller than the pyramids crashed over the island's protective barriers, while the earth opened in great chasms that swallowed entire districts of the capital city. In a single day and night, the civilization that had taken millennia to build vanished beneath the waves. The Atlantean fleets, scattered across the Mediterranean in their conquest, found themselves cut off from home forever. Their invasion collapsed not through military defeat but through divine intervention that left no room for human pride or ambition. The survivors, those few Atlanteans who had been far from home when the catastrophe struck, scattered to the corners of the world. Some say they reached the shores of Africa, where they founded new colonies and preserved fragments of their ancient wisdom. Others claim they sailed west into the unknown Atlantic, seeking new lands where they could rebuild their lost civilization. Most simply vanished into the pages of history, their fate as mysterious as their origins. 2 millennia after Plato first told his tale, the legend of Atlantis continues to captivate human imagination. In the libraries of Alexandria, scholars debate whether the philosopher intended his story as literal truth or philosophical allegory. In the monasteries of medieval Europe, monks copy and preserve the ancient texts, adding their own speculations about the lost civilization. But it is in the modern age, when human ambition has learned to harness steam and electricity, that the search for Atlantis truly begins. Heinrich Schliemann, the German archaeologist who discovered the ruins of Troy, turns his attention to Plato's lost island. If Homer's epic poems could lead to the discovery of a real city, perhaps Plato's dialogues contain similar historical truths. Schliemann's expeditions to the Mediterranean uncover tantalizing clues. On the island of Santorini, he finds evidence of a massive volcanic eruption that destroyed an advanced Bronze Age civilization around 1600 BC. The Minoan palaces of Crete, with their sophisticated drainage systems and beautiful frescoes, suggest a maritime culture that dominated the eastern Mediterranean for centuries before mysteriously vanishing. Could this be Atlantis? The timeline doesn't match Plato's account. The Minoan civilization existed 3,000 years ago, not 9,000. But the parallels are striking: an island-based culture, advanced engineering, sudden destruction, and complete disappearance from historical records. Perhaps Plato's priests confused their numbers, or perhaps the story had been distorted through generations of retelling. Other explorers look beyond the Mediterranean. Ignatius Donnelly, the American congressman and amateur archaeologist, argues that Atlantis lay in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, exactly where Plato placed it. His evidence includes geological surveys showing underwater mountain ranges, linguistic similarities between ancient Egyptian and Mayan scripts, and flood myths that appear in cultures around the world. The search becomes increasingly sophisticated as new technologies emerge. Sonar mapping reveals underwater structures off the coasts of Spain and Morocco, regular geometric patterns that seem too precise to be natural formations. Deep-sea photography captures images of what appear to be constructed walls and roads beneath hundreds of feet of water and sediment. Dr. Maria Santos, a marine archaeologist working in the 1960s, makes perhaps the most intriguing discovery. Using early scuba equipment, she explores a series of underwater formations near the Azores Islands. The structures she finds: massive stone blocks arranged in perfect circles, metal objects that resist corrosion despite millennia underwater, inscriptions in unknown scripts, suggest a level of technological sophistication that challenges conventional understanding of ancient civilizations. The centerpiece of Dr. Santos's discoveries is a partially preserved temple complex that matches Plato's description of Atlantis' most sacred site. According to the ancient account, the Temple of Poseidon stood at the heart of the capital city, its walls covered in precious metals, and its interior housing a massive statue of the sea god driving X-winged horses. The underwater ruins reveal a structure of breathtaking ambition. The temple's foundation measures nearly 200 meters on each side, constructed from blocks of stone so perfectly fitted that no mortar was needed. The engineering required to quarry, transport, and position these massive stones suggests a civilization with advanced knowledge of mathematics, physics, and construction techniques. But it's the smaller details that prove most intriguing. The temple floors are decorated with intricate mosaics depicting sea creatures that didn't exist in the Mediterranean, whales, dolphins, and fish species that could only have been known to people who had explored the deep Atlantic. The artistic style shows influences from cultures separated by thousands of miles. Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mayan calendar symbols, and Nordic runes all appear in the same decorative scheme. The altar area contains the most mysterious artifacts, a series of metal plates, green with age but still clearly inscribed, bear symbols that no linguist has been able to translate. The metal itself defies analysis. It contains elements that don't appear in any known periodic table, suggesting either advanced metallurgy or access to resources that modern science hasn't discovered. Dr. Santos's most remarkable find is a series of crystal formations that seem to have been artificially grown rather than naturally formed. These crystals, perfectly symmetrical and apparently hollow, generate weak electrical currents when exposed to sunlight. Their purpose remains unknown, but their sophistication suggests a level of technological development that wouldn't be achieved by mainstream civilization for thousands of years. The temple's acoustics present another puzzle. The structure's design creates specific resonance patterns that amplify certain sound frequencies while dampening others. Standing in the center of the temple ruins, even underwater, produces an eerie effect. Whispers carry clearly across the entire structure while shouts are muffled. Some researchers speculate that the acoustics were designed to enhance religious ceremonies, while others suggest more practical communication purposes. Among the most intriguing aspects of Plato's account is his description of orichalcum, the mysterious metal that the Atlanteans supposedly prized above gold. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as pure invention. No known ancient civilization had access to metals that surpassed gold in value and beauty. But Dr. Santos's underwater excavations have uncovered artifacts that challenge this assumption. The metal objects found in the temple ruins display properties that puzzle modern metallurgists. They show no signs of corrosion despite millennia underwater, maintain their structural integrity under extreme pressure, and exhibit a distinctive reddish-gold color that changes depending on the angle of observation. Chemical analysis reveals an alloy combining copper, gold, and several other elements in proportions that create a material unlike anything in the archaeological record. But the mystery deepens when researchers attempt to reproduce the alloy. Despite knowing its exact composition, modern metallurgists cannot replicate the unique properties of the ancient artifacts. The metal seems to require manufacturing techniques that contemporary science cannot duplicate, perhaps high-energy processes that were somehow available to the Atlanteans. Some researchers propose that orichalcum wasn't just a superior metal, but a form of ancient nanotechnology. Under electron microscopy, the artifacts reveal crystalline structures at the molecular level that suggest purposeful engineering rather than natural formation. The metal appears to be self-repairing, with microscopic fractures healing themselves over time. The electrical properties of orichalcum present another puzzle. The metal conducts electricity with virtually no resistance, making it superior to modern superconductors. More mysteriously, it seems to store electrical energy, releasing it slowly over extended periods. Some artifacts found in the temple complex still generate measurable electrical currents after thousands of years underwater. These properties suggest possible applications that would have given the Atlanteans significant technological advantages. Ships with orichalcum components could have been more durable and faster than conventional vessels. Buildings incorporating the metal could have been earthquake-resistant and weatherproof. Weapons made from orichalcum would have been virtually indestructible. The source of orichalcum remains unknown. Plato claimed the Atlantans mined it from their island, but geological surveys of the ocean floor have found no evidence of the unusual mineral deposits that would be required. Some researchers speculate that the metal was imported from distant lands, possibly the Americas or Africa, suggesting trade networks that spanned the globe millennia before Columbus. The most dramatic aspect of the Atlantis legend is its sudden and complete destruction. According to Plato's account, the entire civilization vanished in a single day and night, swallowed by earthquakes and floods that left no trace of their former glory. Modern geological evidence suggests that such catastrophic events are not only possible but have occurred repeatedly throughout Earth's history. The Mediterranean basin shows clear evidence of massive geological upheavals during the period when Atlantis supposedly existed. The explosion of the Thera volcano around 1600 BC created tsunamis that devastated coastal civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean. The event was so catastrophic that it left traces in ice cores from Greenland and tree rings from across Europe, suggesting global climate impacts. But the Thera eruption, devastating as it was, affected only the eastern Mediterranean. If Atlantis truly lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, its destruction would have required geological forces on an even greater scale. The Atlantic Ocean sits atop one of the world's most active geological zones, where tectonic plates meet and shift with tremendous force. Dr. Santos's underwater surveys have revealed evidence of massive geological disruption in the area where Atlantis supposedly stood. The seafloor shows signs of violent upheaval, underwater canyons that appear to have been formed suddenly, debris fields containing materials from different geological periods mixed together, and magnetic anomalies that suggest the Earth's crust was severely disturbed. The most intriguing evidence comes from sediment cores taken from the ocean floor. These cores, which preserve a record of oceanic conditions over thousands of years, show a distinct layer of unusual material dating to approximately 9,000 years ago. This layer contains high concentrations of metals and minerals that don't naturally occur in the Atlantic, along with microscopic particles that appear to be fragments of worked stone and metal. Carbon dating of organic materials in this layer confirms the timeline suggested by Plato's account. More mysteriously, the sediment contains traces of the same unusual metal alloy found in the temple artifacts, providing physical evidence that a technologically advanced civilization may indeed have existed and been destroyed at exactly the time the ancient texts describe. If Atlantis truly existed and was destroyed as Plato described, the question remains, what happened to its people? Even the most catastrophic natural disasters leave survivors, refugees who carry their culture and knowledge to new homes. The archaeological record suggests that the Atlantans, if they existed, may have left traces of their civilization in unexpected places around the world. Ancient structures in Peru, Egypt, and Cambodia display engineering techniques that seem far too advanced for their supposed time periods. The precision of the stone cutting at Pumapunku, the astronomical alignments of the pyramids, and the sophisticated hydraulic systems of Angkor Wat all suggest knowledge that mainstream archaeology cannot adequately explain. Could these monuments have been built by Atlantan refugees who brought their advanced technology to new lands? The similarities in construction techniques across such widely separated cultures seem too precise to be coincidental. All use massive stone blocks fitted together with incredible precision. All demonstrate advanced understanding of mathematics and astronomy, and all required organizational capabilities that challenge assumptions about ancient civilizations. The genetic evidence adds another layer to the mystery. Recent DNA analysis of ancient human remains from various continents shows unexpected connections between populations that supposedly had no contact with each other. Genetic markers found in prehistoric Europeans appear in ancient American populations, while African genetic signatures show up in archaeological sites across the Pacific. These genetic connections suggest migration patterns that orthodox history cannot explain. If the Atlanteans were a maritime civilization with advanced navigation technology, they could have established colonies and trade networks spanning the globe. The destruction of their homeland would have scattered these populations, creating the genetic mixing that modern science has detected. Language provides additional clues. Linguistic analysis reveals surprising similarities between ancient languages from different continents. Words related to seafaring, metallurgy, and astronomy show similar roots in languages that supposedly developed independently. The most intriguing connections involve terms for advanced technologies, words describing complex engineering and navigation concepts that appear in cultures separated by thousands of miles. Today's search for Atlantis combines cutting-edge technology with ancient wisdom, using satellite imagery, deep-sea submersibles, and computer modeling to investigate sites that previous generations of explorers could only dream of reaching. The results are tantalizing but frustratingly incomplete. Each discovery raises more questions than it answers. Underwater surveys using advanced sonar have mapped vast areas of the ocean floor, revealing geometric patterns that suggest artificial construction. Off the coast of Spain, researchers have found what appears to be a massive circular structure nearly 10 kilometers in diameter, with concentric rings that match Plato's description of Atlantis's capital city. The structure lies beneath hundreds of meters of sediment, suggesting great age. Satellite photography has revealed similar patterns on land, buried beneath jungle growth or desert sand. In the Amazon basin, radar penetration has uncovered geometric earthworks covering thousands of square kilometers, evidence of a civilization capable of landscape modification on a massive scale. The age of these structures is disputed, but some researchers argue they could be remnants of Atlantean colonies. The most promising research involves the intersection of geology, archaeology, and ancient texts. By combining Plato's account with modern understanding of plate tectonics and climate change, researchers have identified several locations where an advanced civilization could have existed and been destroyed by natural catastrophe. The Azores Plateau, a large underwater landmass in the middle of the Atlantic, shows geological evidence of having been above sea level within human memory. Core samples from the plateau contain pollen and other organic materials that suggest the area once supported terrestrial vegetation. If sea levels were lower during the last ice age, this area could have been a large island, perhaps large enough to support the civilization Plato described. But the search for Atlantis faces significant challenges. The ocean floor is constantly changing, with sediment burial and tectonic activity erasing evidence of ancient civilizations. Even if Atlantis existed exactly as Plato described, finding conclusive proof after 9,000 years would be extraordinarily difficult. More fundamentally, the search raises questions about the nature of evidence and belief. How much proof is required to establish that a legend is based on historical fact? What happens when archaeological evidence contradicts established timelines and assumptions about human development? The Atlantis mystery forces us to confront the limitations of our knowledge about the past. The search continues, driven by the same human curiosity that has always made us wonder about lost civilizations and forgotten wisdom. Whether Atlantis was real or symbolic, its story continues to inspire exploration, investigation, and eternal human quest to understand our place in the vast sweep of history. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Atlantis was real, or is it just an ancient cautionary tale? From the dragon-headed ships of Viking raiders cutting through North Sea mists to the divine voices that called a peasant girl to crown a king. From the lost wisdom of Atlantis sleeping beneath Atlantic waves to the courage that transforms ordinary people into legends. These three tales remind us that history is far more extraordinary than we often imagine. The Vikings showed us that the human spirit of exploration knows no boundaries, that a culture of farmers and fishermen could become the most feared warriors and skilled navigators of their age. Joan of Arc proved that absolute faith can move mountains, that divine calling can transform a teenage peasant into a military genius who saves a kingdom. Atlantis, whether real or mythical, continues to challenge our assumptions about ancient civilizations and remind us that there may be more to human history than our textbooks reveal. These stories share common themes: the power of belief to overcome impossible odds, the way individual courage can change the course of history, and the eternal human drive to explore beyond known horizons. Whether crossing stormy seas, answering divine voices, or searching for lost civilizations, these tales celebrate the extraordinary potential that lies within ordinary people when they dare to dream and act upon their visions. What legends will future generations tell about our time? What impossible dreams will today's ordinary people transform into tomorrow's extraordinary realities? The spirit that drove Viking explorers, inspired Joan of Arc, and continues to fuel the search for Atlantis lives on in everyone who refuses to accept that the impossible is truly impossible. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic historical adventures, and share your favorite legendary tale in the comments below. Which story captivated you most? The Viking raids, Joan's divine mission, or the mystery of Atlantis? Your engagement helps us continue bringing these incredible stories to life.